The air in the auditorium was thick with applause, the kind of applause that belonged entirely to my sister. She beamed, a perfect smile plastered on her face, the one that seemed to be rewarded with every privilege imaginable while I was invisible. My heart pounded, a mix of anger, humiliation, and disbelief. I had spent years quietly supporting myself, excelling in school, dreaming of a future where my parents might actually notice me. But all those hopes had dissolved in a single, cruel sentence. Dad's booming voice echoed through the hall. "This is our pride," he announced, gesturing grandly to my sister as if she were the only worthy heir of our family's name. The crowd cheered, oblivious to the tension spiraling in the corner where I stood. A silent shadow swallowed by the limelight reserved for her. Then, as if rehearsed for maximum humiliation, his grip was on my collar. The leather of his watch dug into my skin, and the sharp hiss of his words cut through the festive music. "And this is the trash." My knees buckled slightly from the shock, my entire body vibrating with humiliation as he yanked me toward the edge of the stage. Laughter erupted from Mom, the sound grotesque in its joy at my degradation, echoing in the marble hall like a cruel soundtrack to my life. My face burned, and I caught the faint smirk of my sister, who had perfected the art of superiority. The teachers and other students turned toward me, a mixture of confusion and awkward sympathy, while Dad's words branded me in that moment, a label that was supposed to define my entire existence. I was pushed off the stage, stumbling down, my shoes scraping against the polished wood, the sting of both the physical and emotional pain intertwining in a sharp, unforgettable ache. Outside, behind the stage curtains, I sank to the floor, trying to catch my breath. The hall continued to cheer for her, for my sister, for the child who had never faced a fraction of the scorn I had endured silently. But in that quiet corner, I made a decision that would forever alter the balance of power in our household. All those years of endurance, the silent sacrifices, the whispered dreams, they weren't going to be in vain. If they thought I was powerless, then I would bow quietly to their ridicule. They were gravely mistaken. A plan began to form in the depths of my mind, precise and unyielding. A chain of events that would ensure they felt, in ways unimaginable, the sting of the cruelty they had imposed on me for years. And as I rose from that floor, trembling but resolute, I knew this was only the beginning. The sting of betrayal burned like acid, but it also ignited a fire. Every memory of being overlooked, every whispered insult behind closed doors, every cruel comparison to my sister became fuel. I traced the edges of the hall in my mind, remembering the key details of every exit, every locked office, the placement of valuables, the timings of household routines. They were threads in a tapestry of revenge I would weave. No loud confrontation, no messy scene. It would be slow, meticulous, and poetic. The world outside, filled with laughter and applause, would be unaware of the storm quietly gathering in the shadows, one that would bring my parents and sister face to face with the consequences of their arrogance, their disdain, their thoughtless cruelty. And in that silence, I allowed a small, determined smile to curve on my lips, because the moment they thought I was nothing, I began to shape the moment when they would know exactly what it felt like to be powerless. The edges of my fury sharpened as I stepped out of the backstage darkness into the empty hallway. I walked past rows of chairs where teachers had watched, past banners celebrating my sister's achievements, absorbing every detail, etching them into memory. The hallway smelled faintly of waxed wood and polish, a contrast to the bitterness in my stomach. I pictured Dad's smug face, Mom's cheering laugh, my sister's triumphant smile, and every beat of my heart carried a silent promise. What they had done to me was only the first act. The real story, the one where they learned what it meant to trample on someone underestimated, was only beginning. And in that solitary corridor, I swore to myself, their laughter would be replaced with pleading, their pride with shame, and the echoes of this night would never leave them, even when the world around them seemed untouched by justice. I sat on the steps outside the auditorium, letting the cool air wash over me. And I realized how much I had endured to get to this point. Every slight, every invisible punishment, every time I had been pushed aside, it had built a reservoir of patience, precision, and planning. I wasn't going to act in haste. I was going to act with the precision of someone who had been wronged, but had spent years calculating the inevitable. This wasn't about immediate satisfaction. This was about crafting an outcome so absolute that they would feel, at every turn, the gravity of their cruelty. I clenched my fists and allowed the memory of the stage, the laughter, and the cruel words to fuel the strategy in my mind. And as I stood, a man reborn from humiliation, I knew that they would never see it coming, but when it unfolded, they would understand fully, painfully, and irrevocably what it meant to underestimate me. The months that followed my sister's graduation were quiet on the surface, but beneath the calm, a storm of calculation brewed. I moved out almost immediately after that day, taking a small apartment that was invisible to everyone who mattered, or, rather, invisible to those I was about to make matter. Every detail of my parents' lives, every schedule they followed, every weakness they flaunted with pride, became a piece of my plan. I watched them from a distance at first, listening, observing, letting their arrogance blind them. The same arrogance that had allowed Dad to publicly humiliate me and Mom to cheer it on their pride was their greatest flaw, and it was about to become their undoing. I started small, quietly infiltrating the world they thought I was locked out of. I returned to school, graduated with honors while working multiple jobs, and quietly built connections in the city, in places that could affect them indirectly without ever exposing myself too soon. I learned about their financial holdings, the investments they flaunted at dinner parties, and their reliance on reputation and appearances to prop up their fragile egos. Each discovery was a key, each secret a lever, and I, the trash, the nobody they had mocked, was holding all the levers. Then came the night I decided to strike the first blow. I knew my sister had a gala plan, a celebration of her so-called achievements, attended by the family and every social circle they cared about. I didn't crash it personally. I didn't need to. Instead, I orchestrated a perfect disruption. Emails sent anonymously, invitations altered, embarrassing mistakes planted subtly in her meticulously curated event, turning it into a spectacle of chaos that no one could ignore. The whispers started almost immediately, friends confused, business contacts questioning her competence, my parents floundering as their carefully constructed image cracked. I watched the fallout from my apartment, a quiet satisfaction settling like ice in my veins. But this was only the beginning. I moved to target my parents directly. Dad had always prided himself on his cars, his symbols of success, leaving them unlocked and unguarded while he flaunted them. One night, under the cover of darkness, I arranged for those symbols to be removed, not destroyed, but made inaccessible in ways that tormented him psychologically. Keys misplaced, alarms triggering without cause, his pride humiliated without a single person knowing it was me. Mom, obsessed with social perception, found herself humiliated as events she organized were subtly sabotaged, relationships strained, and her influence quietly undermined. Each moment of quiet frustration, each small unraveling, was the exact mirror of what they had inflicted on me for years. The true masterstroke came when I confronted them, not physically, not immediately, but through the medium they valued most, control. Their home, once a fortress of their pride, became a maze of empty rooms, locked doors, and missing essentials. I had arranged for utilities to be subtly redirected, for important documents to vanish, and for trusted staff who had enabled their arrogance to quietly vanish from their lives. Calls went unanswered, plans faltered, and slowly, the empire they had built on appearances began to crumble from within. I watched from the sidelines, invisible, untouchable, as panic and confusion replaced the smug certainty that had been my childhood hell. And then, the most poetic moment arrived. I appeared at their doorstep, calm, collected, no hint of rage or desperation, only the quiet power of inevitability. They begged, stammered, tried to appeal to the child they had once mocked, but the child was gone. Standing before them was a man who had endured, planned, and executed a perfect reckoning. I made them witness every small humiliation, every frustration, every loss in reverse, showing them what it truly meant to underestimate someone they thought was worthless. Dad's pride shattered, Mom's smugness evaporated, and my sister's carefully built image lay in ruin. all without a single word of vengeance shouted. Without a public spectacle, they felt it quietly, painfully, impersonally. Exactly as I had. The best part was that it wasn't just punishment, it was liberation. I reclaimed every bit of dignity they had stripped from me. Every laugh they had shared at my expense came back to them multiplied. Every insult they had hurled at me returned in mirrored consequences. But unlike them, I didn't gloat unnecessarily. I let their shame simmer, internalized, corrosive. The weight of their own choices crushing them silently, day after day. And as I walked away from their once proud home, leaving them to reckon with the emptiness they had built round themselves, I finally felt the peace that comes from watching justice, precise and unrelenting, unfold exactly as it should. Years later, I look back on that day on the stage, Dad sneering, Mom laughing, my sister preening in the spotlight, and I can only smile. They taught me what it meant to endure, to be underestimated, and to wait. And when the right moment came, when patience, planning, and precision converged, I showed them that the child they called trash could, with quiet brilliance, make the mighty fall. Every tear, every stifled laugh, every hidden plan, they all led here. And finally, I was free.